You're listening to the Truth About Fur podcast. The Truth About Fur podcast is a co-production between the Fur Institute of Canada and Wild Origins Canada.
I feel underdressed in this episode. I don't have our shirts are on par.
Yeah,
like they're not a white and you don't have a tie on, but the fact that I'm missing a blazer jacket, I feel unprofessional, unprepared. Probably people are going to look at it and go, "Oh, this guy is not credible. Why is he on this show? Like he's not even taking being professional serious here and wearing a blazer
This is
coat."
What happens when I schedule calls like back to back to back to back to back and be like, I'm sure I'll be done and have time to change before we record the podcast, and then I just didn't. So this was for not to say that I wasn't getting dolled up for the good folks watching Truth About Fur podcast, but
no, there's nothing wrong with that. what they also have to realize, the folks here, our community is going to appreciate this, is you've got like a casual business button-down shirt on, you've got a blazer jacket, you've got your FIC pin on, very professional looking, but you have these bright floral tropical shorts on. Like, because you were just in the tropics on a holiday, they're probably like got parrots and like pineapples and tropical fish and stuff.
Now I just want a pair of like tropical, like Hawaiian style, like swimming trunks that just have a bunch of fur bearers on them.
There we go.
There's an idea. There's some FIC merch coming down the pipe later this year.
Or underwear, like boxer shorts. People feel it's important that your boxers make a statement nowadays. So we could have the line of the different fur bearer.
Yeah, if
FIC
there's anybody
boxers.
from was it Saks? Anybody from any of the big boxer companies that's watching? Hit us up. We got ideas.
Yeah, no, like forget the classic cars and the poker cards and the that sort of stuff. Like let's get
there's some Wolverines and
yeah. There we go. Lynx and all kinds of stuff. So, anyways, we digress with our amazing business ideas. Jumping into the topics, number one on your list is you got some stuff about the Russian sable auctions and kind of what that sort of means, big picture.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of business, there's a lot of optimism in the fur business right now. A lot of good vibes. I mean, I've been here for almost 4 years here at the FIC, and I haven't seen this level. I wasn't around in the heydays, the 2013s of our past, but I'm just seeing enthusiasm across the board. Enthusiasm from buyers, enthusiasm from trappers, enthusiasm from the auction house. That folks that are paying attention to what Fur Harvesters is putting out their market updates, saying, hey, we want more wild mink. Hey, we want more castor. Hey, we want more sables. There's something like almost intangible going on in the business, and we'll see what that bears out at Fur Harvesters in March. But there are kind of two auctions that come in before the traditional auction season nowadays, and those are the two Russian auctions. So there was the December sable auction and January sable auction. And the December auction, I think, was up 100% over last year on prices. And the January sale, I believe, was 140% over last year. So obviously very encouraging, at least on sables. There's a lot of attention, a lot of demand, a lot of folks buying out of China, folks out of South Korea that are really interested in sables. So for folks that are trapping here in Canada, that they maybe aren't in the Northwoods, our marten is a cousin to a sable. And when you look at the offering at Fur Harvesters, they just put out their initial offering for the March sale. You're not going to see a line that says marten. You're going to see a line that says sables. And it's in the industry, in the kind of manufacturing retail industry, they're, for all intents and purposes, they're one item. So if demand is up 100% on sables in Russia, I'm not going to say it's automatically that demand will be up 100% on sables here in Canada. It is still a slightly different product, but it means that there's enthusiasm in the market and there's demand in the market and that people are willing to pay for demand. This doesn't seem like it'll be a sale where the top quality, top lock goods sit, and then there's a ton of fighting from like the mid-level down. This was in the Russian auctions, it was a fight from the first page to the last page of the auction book. So, it's a positive sign that there are folks that are interested. It's a positive sign that, in conversations I've had with the folks at For Harvesters, I was there in January. For the Trappers Convention, they said there's a ton of demand from international buyers of folks that are calling to get letters of invitation for visa applications to be able to come and attend the auction in March. So maybe an all-time record in terms of buyers for in North Bay, which would be incredible news to see that there's that much demand, that much international demand. It's never a bad thing to have more people in the room, in the auction room. So it's encouraging anyway. And I hear from folks from around the world on this stuff, interest in lynx cats, interest in sables, interest in a few other items, that there's really strong interest. So never, it's easy to be, I shouldn't say it's easy to be optimistic. I have to be optimistic in this job. But it seems as though there's finally a reason to be optimistic. Beyond a blip here or there. The $100 skunks last year, prices were up on ermine last year, things like that. Like this appears to be a kind of whole of industry increase, augmentation, and hearing positive signs about the ranch fur auctions that'll be coming up later in March as well. So we'll see where things land on the Saga March sale. The Fur Harvester sale is the 19th to 21st, I believe, of March. And then after that, I forget if it's American Mink Exchange is first after that or Saga is first after that on the ranch fur side. But hearing very positive things potentially on a lot of the offering on the ranch fur side as well.
Excellent. In your experience, have you seen these correlations before? Like, when something happens with Russian auctions, sable, then it's like, this is what we've seen happen in Canada, like shortly after that. Is there a history to draw some of this optimism on patterns?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say from people who are far more experienced in this than I am, that it is it's rare that you would see such a major increase in the Russian sale and then not see an increase. It doesn't map 100%. It's not that 100% increase in St. Petersburg is 100% increase in North Bay. It's 80%, maybe it's 120%. It could go either way. But certainly it's something that I'm hearing on the buyer side and the retail manufacturer side, that people are getting ready for the fact that their input cost is likely higher this coming season, that they're getting ready for having to pay more for fur. And it's that doesn't necessarily hurt the business, right? It's people that want to buy fur coats. And we have great retailers across the country and around the world that are really good at selling fur coats to people. And it seems as though, for whatever reason, there is an increased demand on certain items coming into this season, and that will have positive repercussions across the trade, as we see things like increased sales on sable. If that demand can hold over the course of the sale season, if it holds through March into the June sale for harvesters, and then into the Russian auctions next fall, that's something where, just a blip on the radar of like, here's a quick up and a quick down. It's nice for 1 year, but what we'd really like to see is, it went up and stayed up or keeps going up, right? It's kind of like we saw on beavers a few years ago. We had a few really strong years on beavers. because of the hatter market and whatever. But that's started to move its way back down now in the last year or so. But if we can kind of set a new plateau and there is new demand for fur in the market, and we'll see where we end up kind of after this auction season. But strong prices motivate trappers to trap. And on certain items, one of the things that I found really interesting when I was in North Bay in January and I sat in on a grading seminar, and talking about sables, Jeff from Fur Harvesters was saying, sables is one of those line items that the law of supply and demand doesn't necessarily map completely onto that good the same way that you would think it would, is because a lot of the buyers on sables are like large manufacturers. They'll pay more for 10,000 skins than they would for 1,000 because they're looking for enough of the product to be able to maintain a large production run, so that there is kind of a critical mass level of, if you're below that, the prices actually diminish instead of increasing the way you see on something like Wolverines. Wolverines are very limited supply, and kind of the fewer there are, the higher the demand is, because if you got an order for Wolverines, you need Wolverine. But on something like sables, where you're getting into that series production, environment, similar on some lines of ranch mink, the rarer mutations, if there aren't enough of them, you don't want to be on a farm and have like 5 really cool looking mink, because no one's going to buy 5 really cool looking mink. You want 5,000 really cool looking mink. And that way you have enough product to put out there for a manufacturer to say, okay, I can make a line of this, I can make a collection of this, as opposed to I can make 3 hats of this.
Interesting. Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed for all the trappers coming up, got product in the March for harvesters, and that this optimism becomes a reality, and kind of sounds like it will, based on kind of what you just said, in the history of, when demand side starts to go up, it holds strong across all the auctions. So that's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to be dealing with a new normal. Like, this is the new normal.
Yeah.
New normal is 200.
Yeah.
If we're going through kind of a regime shift in the market of, going back 20 years or 15 years, like when coyotes got expensive, right? Like in the days of Canada Goose and Moose Knuckle and Macaj and all these guys that were manufacturing, coyote rough parkas, and then all of the kind of second and third degree manufacturers after that. And we went from $20 coyotes to $150 coyotes, $250 coyotes for 10 years. And then the market fell off. Like, if this is the start of a new good 10 years, I'm certainly not going to be disappointed.
Yeah, and especially for a fur bearer like a marten, that's just, at least in Western Canada, is just such a huge staple for a trapper on his line, or in his territory. And as long as the forest is being managed appropriately, then the thing is their densities are respectable, on the landscape, and very, very dependable bread and butter species in Western Canada. So it would be good to see that prices super strong for those folks. Awesome. Now, you were in Ottawa recently, convincing every single federal MP in the great nation of Canada that fur is awesome, and that they support fur, and they will vote down any bill that's against fur, and they will fight tooth and nail of any import bans that other countries try to impose on Canada. So does that sum up Fur Day on the Hill?
Yeah, and we can skip to the next agenda item. You kind of took the words
there
out of
you
that.
go.
I thought you were going to say I convinced every MP to buy a fur coat. And that's
that too.
Up on sable, but
fur hat. They'll all have big fur hats when they go in the wintertime, when they go into the sitting of the legislature. So
yeah, it's a Fur Day. Fur Day is great, and for me, my background working in politics, I mean, I've been on the other side of the table on Fur Day once upon a time when I had slightly fewer gray hairs. back when I was a staffer in 2014-15. And that's how I actually got introduced to the Fur Institute once upon a time. But we brought back Fur Day in 2023 after I came on board here, after COVID travel restrictions were pretty well out the door. Because it's important for us to go and ensure that people that are making decisions that will impact the lives of trappers, impact the lives of seal hunters, impact the lives of fur farmers, and everybody else through the entire supply chain, the manufacturers, the skin dealers, the folks that are importing, exporting. The federal government has a lot of levers over the fur industry. We often think of the fur industry and trapping in particular, we think of provincial governments because they're the ones setting the trapping regs. They're the ones setting, quotas or bag limits or tags. But the folks who control whether Canadian trappers, Canadian fur farmers, and Canadian sealers are able to participate in the global fur market aren't the provinces and territories, it's the feds. So, we brought back Fur Day in 2023. We had a successful Fur Day in 23, successful Fur Day in 24. Last year, Justin Trudeau decided to resign, which put a bit of a cramp in our style. We like to do these in February so that we can actually show off some fur. And last year we weren't able to hold one because of the prorogation and Liberal leadership, and then the election. And
Right.
we work with a firm in Ottawa, and we said, like, should we just push it to the fall? And they're like, well, people are still, ministers are just really starting to get their feet under them, and staff are really still getting assigned. Like, you're better off probably just to push it to 2026. So we came back in February 2026 with the kind of the return of Fur Day, and I was giving a media interview to a Ottawa area news publication that looks at, called the Lobby Monitor, that does covers lobby days and lobbying techniques and things like that. I told the reporter, yeah, like, we were going to do one last February, and at the last minute we had to pull the plug because of prorogation. He was like, Doug, if I had a nickel for every industry association, organization, NGO that told me that they had to push their lobby day because of the prorogation, he said, I wouldn't be working at this magazine anymore. He said, I probably own this magazine. So it's, and for us, I think we're a little bit unique in our space, in that because of the diversity of issues that we work on, because of the wildlife management implications of trapping, because of the agricultural implications of mink and fox farming, because of the importance to Indigenous communities of trapping and seal hunting. We have a little bit different political cachet than some of our friends in kind of the broader hunting, trapping, sustainable use of wildlife movement here in Canada. So, we were happy. We had meetings, with Conservatives, with Liberals, with the NDP, with senators from different SAC groups. We had a meeting with the Korean embassy. Something we had never done before was we reached out to the diplomatic corps to try and set up some meetings with major fur producing and fur importing nations. So South Korea is a very very important market and growing market for fur, for Canadian fur, especially things like cats. And we had a full on meeting with the charge d'affaires at the embassy to talk about, hey, the fur that you see on the streets in Seoul, a lot of it's coming from Canada, and this is an important part. Not a top level of the Excel spreadsheet in Canada and Korea's trade relationship, but like, this is an important through line in our trading relationship. And a lot of what we were there to talk about was to motivate the government of Canada, and like to motivate our politicians to take a stronger stand against some of these trade bans, and to have the government of Canada weighed in with the UK and say, hey, this is something that, we would really rather you not pass your private member's bill that says it's going to ban fur, and here's why. And, same with the Swiss and the bill that's being debated in the Swiss parliament about maybe banning fur or putting imports restrictions and things like that. We've been working closely with the IFF to make sure that lands a way that won't restrict Canadian fur going into Switzerland, but would be great to see the government of Canada, muscle up a little bit on that as well. There's efforts to ban farm fur from Europe, to make sure that when we're talking about trade relationships, when we saw in the news yesterday that Prime Minister Carney is trying to like merge the EU into the Trans-Pacific Partnership and build this like giant global trade bloc, to be able to say, like, on agenda item number 72 of like, hey, fur is important here, and you banning sealskin products is just an irritant to this overall conversation, that like this is important to us. It matters to us, not necessarily because of the overall dollar value, but because of the impact it has on communities, the impact it has on fisheries management. These are the kinds of things we need you to think about as we further these conversations, or conversations around the Arctic and Arctic defense. One of the things that we were asking for at Fur Day was, there was great research that came out of the National Research Council a few years ago around the personal protective equipment that's issued to Government of Canada employees and members of the Canadian Armed Forces who are assigned to extreme cold weather environments, and evaluating those garments and accessories against sealskin and beaver fur garments and accessories. Because anybody who's ever been posted to Resolute in the armed forces, within, they get their standard issue cold weather PPE, and like within a week, they're in the community trying to find a grandmother or auntie who can make them a pair of sealskin mitts because they're freezing to death. So the NRC actually like went and did the, scientific research on like, this is the heat factor of insulating factor and ability to block wind and things like this on sealskin and beaver fur in particular. And it was like, in every evaluation, they were like, this is equal to or superior to the synthetic alternative. So
Cool.
in a moment of buy Canadian, in a moment of let's actually, we're turning towards the Arctic and we want to make sure that folks we're sending to the Arctic are properly equipped. Hey, it just so happens that the people who've been living there for hundreds and thousands of years figured something out with this whole wearing sealskin and wearing fur thing. Let's start to actually formally incorporate that into government procurement and say, this is what we want to get. I mean, the same way that they currently do for, the RCMP and Parks Canada with the muskrat hats. And I can remember when I was in government, the RCMP proposed getting rid of the muskrat hats, and in fairly short order, we made abundantly clear that that's not going to happen. Because there was uproar from RCMP officers saying like, yeah, when you're pulling people over on the side of the road in Saskatchewan, -40, putting a toque on doesn't quite cut it. You're manning a roadblock and wearing a knit cap, you're going to be pretty chilly here after a while.
Huh. Very, very cool. So cool stories to expose our elected MPs to that type of thing, so they can connect A and B together a little bit more. That's super exciting. I would always think it would be interesting if our federal government is bringing up these issues like you talked about the fur and the seal skin bans as part of sort of a new global trading alliances to at least listen to South Africa when they go, well, Canada, remember that ban on hunting trophy imports that you brought in last year on rhino and elephant horn and ivory? Well, same thing. So
Yeah.
How about you go back and revisit that and think about our communities and what that means to us from a trade perspective and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, and I can remember we weighed in on that regulatory consultation, being like, hey, the thing you were proposing to do to ban imports of elephant ivory and rhino horn because of
is what you're trying to
is literally the thing we're asking you to fight against on seal products in the rest of the world. And I can remember when they brought out the final regulation, they have I'm gonna get nerdy here for a minute. They have the RIAS, the Regulatory Impact Assessment Statement. Summary, maybe statement or summary. Like few pages of like, here's what we heard in the consultation and this, that, and the other. And it was like, in the consultation, it was like, we heard from one national hunting or international hunting association and one national fur association. And I know that there was somebody like, the people writing the RIAS maybe weren't like the subject matter experts. It's like they took the notes from the subject matter experts and they gave them to the people who write the RIASs. And it was just like, to be that person, be like, why's the Fur Association talking to us about elephant ivory and rhino horn? But it's like, because we're part of the broader sustainable use of wildlife community. And we can't be saying out of the one side of our mouth, hey, Southern African nations, we're not accepting your exports of hunting trophies because of vibes. And then out of the other side of our mouths being like, hey, Europeans, you really need to stop banning our seal products because of vibes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's called having integrity.
Yeah.
So, well, good for you for,
consistent anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Or not being a hypocrite. Okay, awesome. So, kind of last thing on Fur Day on the Hill, like, do you draw in MPs that are like, I have no idea what this is all about? Like, they're coming in with curiosity, or do you get the standard MPs that are just like, yep, I'm with you? Or do you get some?
I'll say we get a mix. Like we certainly have
cool.
some frequent flyers. I mean, Blaine Calkins, who well.
Yep.
Blaine is our sponsor for our, to be able to have a reception on Parliament Hill, you need an MP who says, yeah, they're with me, they can use the room.
Gotcha.
So Blaine always is our,
he's
say
the
sponsor,
guy.
but they're not paying for it. It's just they're the one
champion,
giving us permission to use it. So Blaine is, as chair of Conservative Anglican Caucus, like every year he's our, sponsor or patron or however you want to say it. And, there's certainly MPs who are very familiar with our organization, very familiar with our industry. Guys like Chris D'Entremont in Acadianapolis. I mean, he's got the most mink farms in his riding of any other MP in the country. Like, he knows the issues facing the industry. But then there are other MPs that, take a meeting because they're like, well, this is an interesting issue, especially where we're bringing in trade implications and agricultural policy and things. We do get MPs that are like, I think in 2024, we had like a member of the finance committee who represented a riding in like suburban GTA. And I can remember them being like, yeah, they took our lobbyists being like, yeah, this MP took a meeting. And I'm like, why? Like, as I'm putting together teams of people from our membership to go to these meetings, and they're like, what should we talk about with this MP? I'm like, I don't know. Like, talk to them about the asks that we're talking to everybody about, because I have no idea what his interest is. And his interest was the trade implications. He was like, I am really intrigued in like the trade policy implications of what it is you're asking for, because this is something that we face on a number of other. I mean, the MP who I just met with was the reason I'm wearing the blazer. And I was talking about like regulatory impediments in the EU, and he was like, man, if I had a nickel for every one of these like weird European regulatory impediments, and he was like, here's an example from the beef industry, and here's an example for like a bunch of other agricultural issues. He's like, and it's all just these like weird non-tariff barrier things that got put through at some point. No one really has a good reason why they're there, but they're reluctant to get rid of them because they're there. So, it's like I say, it's interesting for us because we do get this kind of broad buy-in, at least on some part of what we do. And we had a lot of new MPs that we had never dealt with. I mean, I used to work on the Hill. I used to work with some of these MPs, so I could always kind of drive up our numbers to our reception, like messaging my Facebook friends, be like, hey, come to my reception so I can say that you're here. But we had a lot of new faces that I was like, I don't know this person from Adam. Like, I have no reason to believe that this person is on our side. And then it's like, get introduced to this new MP, and they're like, oh, I'm a cattle rancher. I'm like, oh, okay, now it makes sense. I was like,
cool.
And they're like, yeah, we have issues with coyotes on our ranch, and so we asked trappers to come trap on the ranch. I'm like, okay, now it all makes sense. And yeah, it was encouraging. We had our biggest turnout ever from the FIC side of things, between board members and friends from the Ontario Fur Managers Federation and friends from Canada Mink Breeders, folks from Saga. We had a pretty stout turnout for our day, and then kind of even greater turnout for our cocktail reception that evening. And there was a gentleman from another one of the industry associations in Ottawa who I had invited, and he attended. And he represents a much larger industry than we do. And he said, Doug, like, I can't understand. He's like, I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but like, how do you have so many MPs here? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, our industry is like 10 times, 100 times the size of the fur industry in Canada in terms of like raw economic contributions to Canada. And he said, I can't get people to return my phone calls. And he's like, but you've got some like political cachet in what you do that it connects with a lot of these decision makers. And he's like, don't lose that. he's like, I want you to understand how valuable that is.
Interesting.
Because he's like, I can get any phone call I want returned on dealing with like some particular international regulatory trade thing. But in terms of like just getting like raw political support, this is something that you guys have like in spades, and don't take it for granted. Because he was like, once upon a time, our industry had this too, because we were even bigger than we are now. And like, we're too big to be ignored. But now still representing like a multi-billion-dollar sector of the Canadian economy. He's like, we don't have this kind of turnout at our events. So it's
good. Well, congratulations. Like that's successful. I think most people like politics or whatever, but
yeah.
it's part of the game, and there are people like you and your board members and stuff that get in there and recognize you have to play in that sandbox as well. Some make or break type decisions can be made at the federal level, like you said, when it comes to international trade and stuff. So you got to be there. You're showing up, you're wearing the suit, you're mixing and mingling with the politicians, and you're making an impact. You're making, people won't forget about you. They'll remember you next year on Fur Day on the Hill, and it'll even be bigger. Bring a friend.
And that's what we tell every MP. It's like, great to see you all this year. Hope to see you twice as many next year. And
good for you.
It's as you said, I mean, for me, that's what I came up in. So it's kind of like for me, it's a little bit of like walk down memory lane type stuff. But it is an important part of what we do, and it's kind of an I don't even necessarily say like underappreciated part of what we do, but it's an understood part of what we do, is that kind of playing in the role of advocating to government on behalf of, and it's a big, at times it can seem like it's a long way between the trap line and federal government, and 95% of the time the federal government isn't doing anything that's going to hurt the trap line, but it's ensuring that when that 5% of time or 1% of the time comes around, that some decision maker somewhere is going to call me up and say, hey, Doug, did you see what, or hey, Doug, we're proposing this set of amendments to regulations. Would this have any impact on what you do? From the government side or from the opposition side, them calling me and saying, hey, did you know what the government's doing?
Yeah, excellent. Well, it's just a little part of what you do in your job, bits and pieces of different things all year round. So it's good work. Interesting to, hear about what happens on Fur Day on the Hill. I can't. This is a cool name. We got to get some T-shirts or something like that. Maybe that'll attract more. Fur Day. I went to Fur Day on the Hill, and you're like, what the heck is that, right? Like, have like a picture of a mountain with a beaver on the top of it, or or something like that. So very cool. Very cool. Good for you. Negative news story. It's actually coming out of my part of the world. Do you want to fill folks in on it? This happened only about an hour away from where I live.
Right. Yeah. So fill in any gaps that I missed, because certainly from local coverage and the local grapevine, you may know more about it than I do. But essentially, a couple of weeks ago, there was in British Columbia, there was a dog that unfortunately got caught in a collar bear trap, a body gripping trap. And I believe the dog died, right, Mark? So
Yep.
the dog
It
died
did.
after a negative interaction with the trap, and the owner was nearby at the time as it occurred and injured themselves in trying to remove the dog from the trap. And as a result of that happening, this dog owner, supported by the usual suspects, let's say, is now calling for a big package of regulatory changes to how trapping is managed in BC, trying to make it more, let's say, to be generous about it, make it more visible where and when trapping activity is occurring, and from their perspective, I'll say, to try and reduce conflict between pets and traps. Um, and got a fair bit of media attention that kind of, we were talking earlier about the price and fur of like these blips of, this seems to have been another one of, here's a big uproar in the media, and then has calmed down somewhat since, but maybe I see that being on the other end of the country and just seeing what I see on the news. But Mark, you're closer to it, so maybe it's a bit different on the ground.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's all this emphasis being put on signs. A lot of blame, being placed on the dog owner. First and foremost, like, it's devastating. I mean, dogs are pets, they're family members, regardless, of how it unfolded. If a dog darted out in the street after a tennis ball, got hit by a car, like whatever, it's devastating. I feel for the people. I could just imagine if it was one of mine. So that's one thing. I can have empathy for what happened to this dog. I have nothing against the dog or the people or a loss, regardless of how it happened. But kind of the way this unfolded was, it was in the backcountry. The industrial logging road had recently been plowed, allowed folks into the backcountry. These people drove in, they stopped, they got out of their car, let the dog out, and right beside where they were parked, there was a beaten path into the trees along the edge of the right-of-way, and the dog just caught the scent, bang, boom, got in the trap. There was the sign, like, right there, active trap line, like on the tree right beside where the trap. But you can appreciate, you just let a dog out of a car and it catches wind of something and it's like it's over the bank doing like whatever. Hindsight is 2020. You stop, you get out, you put your dog on a leash, you let him out of the vehicle, when you're in the backcountry. I will absolutely be honest, I don't do that with my dogs in the backcountry, but I'm generally not in the backcountry in the wintertime with my dogs where the trappers are working. The low part of the settled valley where we live are generally not trapping areas. They don't start till you just kind of get on the peripheral of the valley and then back into the mountains. Not a lot of the trap lines because of the risk of people. But so there was a sign there. It was overlooked. What I don't know and that I haven't found out in defense of the trapper is, people are saying, like, how can you put this like right beside where people park on the side of the road? Like, it's very possible. And like I said, I don't know this for sure. The trapper could have been sledding up there for the last month. And this is just one of the sets that he had on the side of the road. During the week, when he goes home and goes back to work, the forestry company comes up and plows the road open because they're going to start logging, up there doing some winter logging. And then all of a sudden everybody's like, hey, did you know such and such a Forest Service road's been plowed? It's open. We can get right to the back end. And the trapper comes back the following week and he's like, holy crap, my road's plowed, I can drive, as opposed to taking my sled up there. So in all fairness, like, was the trap actually set right beside where people were going to go? That I don't know. It could have been, that circumstance. But yeah, it's translated into this big petition to the government to update the trapping regulations, which I don't know what update means. Like, we have the most effective traps on the face of the planet from an animal humane perspective in this country, and we certify and test them in this country. You can't get any better than that from a humane perspective. We have, I think one of the most comprehensive systems in the country for trapping, like an actual designated trap line, a regulation, season dates, regulations on trap sizes, yada, yada, yada. And all the emphasis is on signage when these things happened, and there isn't metal tags on the trap with a phone number. And would a metal tag on a trap that has the trapper's phone number on it or license number prevent a dog from sticking its head in? No, it wouldn't. So like, that's not a solution, right? And if you want, folks, go online and search for a news outlet here in my community called eNow News. So KNOW, like no, eNow knows news. And I had an op-ed published about a week ago, kind of talking to a bunch of this stuff. So it's a phenomenon. We know it in the world. They're called victim laws, where something tragic happens. So then you got to change the laws on how something is governed in order to prevent it from happening. They're emotionally driven. They're driven out of a tragic event. But what we're then caught up in is making regulatory and policy changes based on this emotion and this impact from a victim's perspective, which takes our head out of the game. And it may not mean that appropriate changes are made at all that would actually reduce the risk of this happening in the future. So it's kind of like, if you've been drinking Friday night, don't make skiing plans of getting up at 6. It's just like, that's not the time to make those decisions. It's not the time to formulate policy and regulations immediately after an event like this, because we're not thinking with our head, and we will do things that only hurt the industry as opposed to help it. So, some of the things they're proposing, which I called out. So the anti-trapping organizations have jumped all over this. We see this all the time in the country. So they're jumping on these folks' cause, and they're trying to amplify it and drive their agenda forward, which is to ban trapping. Like, they're trying to say we need to make it safer for pets and more. No, they're not. They're trying to ban trapping. This becomes a convenient moment in their agenda to try to move more restrictions forward. So they're not interested in the safety of anybody's pets. They're interested in ending this, right? So for years and years and years, the anti-trapping organizations have been condemning killing traps. They're inhumane, blah, 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 the animal suffering, all this kind of stuff. And it's like, no, they're not. Like I said before, they are the most effective wildlife killing instrument on the face of the planet. And we design and create and certify them here in this country. So then they're advocating that they should be banned and replaced with the restraining traps, the footholds. So so that you could release your dog, what has the anti-trapping community done for decades and decades and decades? Oh, these restraining traps are inhumane. They hold the animal. The animal doesn't want to be caught. It's, it's cruel, blah, 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 blah. And it injures their foot and all this kind of stuff. So now they're advocating for it, not because they're interested in animal welfare or pet safety. It's a convenient narrative because the dog was killed by a killing trap. So they're advocating for restraining traps, where a month ago they didn't like restraining traps. So they're just capitalizing on an emotional moment. There's no logic to what they're saying. They want bait banned. And it's like, well, that's the same as banning trapping, right?
Exactly.
Like, what are you going to attract a lynx with? Like a spearmint gum? Like what? The dog's still going to go, oh, spearmint. I like that.
Well,
too.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing, is they try and really it's about death by 1,000 cuts. And it's, here we're gonna take killing traps away from you, and you're gonna have to use restraining traps. Oh wait, actually, we have 50 years of advocacy that we've done against like hold traps too. So we're gonna make you as soon as the government says, yeah, we're getting rid of killing traps, it's only foothold traps, then they'll be like, well, we'd really rather not that you allow foothold traps.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah. No, that's exactly, we can see right through what they're doing. So one of the things I would advocate to the hunting community that I think has happened in things like this and the advocating for Moon's laws and more restrictions on trapping is we have lost our place in our communities. We've lost our relationship with our community, our neighbors, our local municipal governments and stuff because of these anti-hunting organizations, which are generally in Edmonton or they're in Vancouver, right? Because they jettison into your community when something like this happens, and they're not part of this community, right? So folks need to just tell them to get lost. And the best thing that could happen in my mind is the community itself tells those folks to get lost and get out of your business, because these trappers are part of our community. We want weekend workshops with our neighbor who owns the trap line where I like to go hunting, so I can talk to him as a neighbor, as a friend, and say, where are you working this year? Where's your active sets? That community to community conversations, community billboards. You drive up and the trappers put a note on there that says, I'm in such and such. Oh, okay, Dave's up, there, or, Joan's down in the bottom this year, and I'll give her a call on the phone. And, weekend workshops to show you how traps work. And, in this safe environment where people in a community can get together and say, hey, could you teach me, what to do if this happened, or, or whatever, and not in this arena of like hatred and marginalizing trappers and harassing and attacking. It takes away community. And I think a problem like this of a pet being caught in a trap meant for wildlife, this is something the community has to work amongst themselves. The solution is not regulatory. It's communities, and communities getting back to being neighbors and being communities and being able to talk about this stuff. It's no different than going like, hey, my neighbor's a logging truck driver. And it's like, I go over and say, hey, where are you hauling this winter or whatever? Well, we're hauling out of the Beaver River or whatever. And it's like, oh, okay, well, we were going to go back up there skiing. You probably shouldn't. The road's really icy. There are trucks coming out of there loaded, the logging contractors. Oh, okay. But, if you turn and go up such and such, it's, we're not up there this winter. Like that stuff happens. Like we're losing that. So my advice out there is, trapping community, don't try to bury your head and keep your eyes down when something like this happens. Reclaim your place in the community and fight for your community, fight for your business, fight for your trap line, fight for your integrity. That you don't want this to happen. You want to work with your community members and get control of it. I mean, the best possible outcome from this would be a community that says, hey, you anti-trapping organization, get lost. We like our trappers. Yet this was an accident. We're going to figure it out as a town. You guys get lost. Leave us alone. And that's, to me, is the best possible outcome. And I think that takes us in keeping our chins up, our head high, and saying we're part of this community too, and building that relationship and solving this, as a community. And I think all it takes is just communication. Like, where are you? Where are you working this winter? Where are you running your line? What, a phone call, a text, a community billboard, whatever. No politician in Victoria is going to figure out a change to the regulations to prevent another dog from getting accidentally caught. But I can sure in the hell tell you, I bet you communities can figure out how to keep this from happening. So kind of a ridiculous situation, but it is what it is, and that's the world we live in. So
yeah,
get out there and get control of your town, folks.
Yeah, and certainly for folks that are out there, for trappers that are out there, or hunters who are out there, dog owners who are out there, there are resources out there to help you understand and to help you show other people and help them understand. In the very unlikely scenario and scenario that we certainly don't want to see happen, that a dog does get in a trap. We have videos on fur.ca. Go to fur.ca, go to fur trapping. I think it's fur trapping techniques. We have a whole series of videos that we did in partnership with the FTGQ, the Trappers Association in Quebec. And part of it is, some of them are for trappers, of here's ways to reduce the chances of having an interaction with the dog, how to do sets around trails to reduce the chances of a domestic dog. Domestic dogs and coyotes or wolves behave fundamentally differently around things like bait. So there's some helpful pointers there in those videos, as well as there's videos around releasing dogs from different kinds of traps. So if you've got friends who are dog owners, if you're listening to this as a hound hunter, those are videos that we would love to see circulate more and see more people see. Those are a resource out there. It's not some kind of behind a firewall, behind a paywall. This is only for us and FIC members, and no one should ever see this. Like, this is for everybody to see, for as many people to understand as possible, and put us in a scenario where maybe we have fewer negative interactions between dogs and traps. When I did my trapper ed course here in Nova Scotia a few years ago, every one of my instructors, like, we'd get going through, like, here's how we do water sets for muskrat, and then like 5 minutes in, they'd be like, but remember, don't screw this up. This is it. Remember, every person in this room could be the person that sets the wrong trap in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yep.
And you're going to end up, you might not be the one in the news, but you'll be the guy who's the reason somebody else is in the news talking about this. And not to say that there was anything done wrong in this scenario, but that every single one of us is under a microscope, whether we know it or not. And it's probably the thing I've done the most media interviews about is dogs and traps. And whether it's PEI or BC or somewhere in between, it happens. It'll never not happen. There's always a chance of it happening. It will always happen at some point, at some time, just by the law of large numbers. But we certainly want to make sure that we do everything we can as a trapping community to reduce the chances of that happening, and have everybody, as Mark, as you said, to make sure that communities and families can continue to be communities and families, and it doesn't turn into a you did this, you did that.
Because no matter what you do, as long as there's trapping exists, something like this will happen. What you want is, if it does happen in a community, to have a good community relationship so that they don't try to lynch the trapper. They're like, total accident, whatever, but we talk to him, we feel bad for him, he feels bad for us, he's not like this monster type person or whatever. It's no different than I'm coming home work for late or whatever, and it's like, oh geez, neighbor's dog runs out, and you got to go knock on their door, right? Like, it's when people know each other, things happen, right? Like, a community can get through that kind of stuff because they know the character and the integrity of all of their neighbors, and that's what gets lost here when these anti-trapping organizations come in. So fight for that, fight for your community, fight for your relationship with these people, and it does take putting yourself out there and getting out a little bit more and having a fur day on the hill in your local town or whatever, right? Like, it's
that's
true.
It. Being
it's about
in the
putting
local,
a face to a trapper. They're human beings. We're human beings. We care. We have kids. We have our own dogs. Like, it's you just need people to go, oh, I see that, right? Like, it's like, okay,
the most valuable tool in the trapper's repertoire is the fur kit at the local community fair. Right. That is the thing that will make the most people. It's funny. We were at Fur Day on the Hill, and we had like a cocktail reception. When you have a lobby day, you have to have a cocktail reception that evening, and we had brought International Fur Dressers Nyers in Winnipeg had generously provided some furs for us for decoration, frankly, more than anything else. And we were there. It was kind of, the night had kind of wrapped up, so we were starting to wind things down and pack things up. And one of the servers from the caterers was, we just noticed she was like doing something, and she was standing there beside one of the standing kind of cocktail tables, like stroking the fur that was on the table. And then she like asked one of our guys went over and said, like, hey, this, do you want to learn a little bit about what's going on here? And we had like different members of like the serving staff and caterers and stuff that were asking us questions about what we do, and what's this animal, what's that animal, what do you use this for, what do you use that for? And it's like to be able to say that like the people who were working the event came away from it understanding a little bit more about what it is we do.
That's important too, right? Because they're members of society that could speak up at some point.
These are people that likely live in downtown Ottawa somewhere.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool.
Whatever your local community event is, if you have furs on a table, somebody will come over and pet them. And that gives you an opportunity to talk to something, because it's really awkward if they just stand there and you stare at them while they pet the fur. So they're gonna want to talk to make it less weird, and that's a great way to introduce people to what it is we do.
One of the things I've been digging into kind of around this, because, when you dig into the layers, one of the anti-trapping organizations here in British Columbia are trying to leverage off of this incident that we've just been talking about to sort of, we've been telling the government this all along. Well, we've written a report on the numbers of cats and dogs that are caught every year in British Columbia and in Canada and blah, 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 blah. Well, I've been digging into that and breaking that down as well. The first thing that comes to mind is like, they're saying like 15 pets a year in British Columbia alone, right? And I'm like, no, it's not. There's a difference between fatally caught but released, and caught and unharmed caught, right? Like, so it's like not everything, and then is a tragic outcome. Second is some of these stories that happen every year across Canada. We covered one about a year ago, which was an illegally set trap. So there was a story of a bobcat, I think, in Calgary a few years ago, and it's like that was not a legally set trap in a subdivision of
bobcat running around with a 110 on its paw.
So it's like, okay, so that is a different conversation about laws. We had a dog that was caught and passed away in an illegally set snare on private land. That's an illegal activity. Regulating or changing a legal practice does not circumvent illegal activities. Different conversation. And the other one that's caught my attention is this whole thing about cats. And it's like, okay, you're adding cats into the numbers of animals that are victims of traps every year. So I'm thinking, nobody takes their cat with them into the backcountry and goes cross-country skiing and it darts off the trail, right? There's something else going on here. There's like 1.5 to like 5 billion feral cats in this country. That is a problem in some areas. So are those being included in the numbers? Illegal trap set because of a feral cat problem, and a feral cat gets caught, the antis, grab this number because it's a news story or whatever. Well, that's not a regulated trapping issue. That is an issue about uncontrolled feral cat populations. Completely different set of regulations or policy that needs to address that. So the whole cat thing that's being thrown into this to pump up the numbers of animals, to me, is super suspicious. And I'm digging into that a little bit more so that I can, sort of argue against the numbers.
Okay. Well, and two, I mean, it's never a popular thing to say, but it does need to be said, is the vast majority of jurisdictions here in Canada also have laws against dogs running at large.
Yeah, and we don't here in British Columbia.
So like this is something we've dealt with in some of these other stories, is like, your dog wouldn't have been in that trap if they were on a leash and they legally were supposed to be on a leash. it's and I mean there's caveats to all of that, if there's hunting dogs and things like that, but there's
Yeah, and that is an issue in my part of the world too. There's conflict between the hound hunters hunting cats in the wintertime and the trap lines because, in some cases they're after the same animals, like a lynx, right? So there's some not good stuff happens there just from a relationship perspective, right?
Yeah,
Setting
well, and that's
traps
where,
off and
these are the kinds of things that are an opportunity I'm sure there is a trapper who is also a hound hunter, to say, like, here's something that, at the local AGM or whatever of the Hound Hunters Association, say, hey, here's something I'm going to do for you guys, is show you, here's how you get your dog out of XYZ if this were to
yep,
happen. Uh,
yep.
that's something that folks can give back to their community, and especially somebody that was also a hound hunter, giving back to their community kind of in two ways.
And if you're a younger trapper and a little bit more tech savvy, you build a relationship with your hound hunting community and say at the start of every year, give me a shout and I will email you the Garmin GPS layer of where I'm at, and you import it into your GPS unit that you're using when your dogs are running, and you can see going, oh man, our dogs are bringing this cat down off that ridge up there, and there's a trap somewhere up there. It's like, we got to get up there and intercept our dog. That's the type of relationship you could build there. Possibly. I'm brainstorming here. Probably not something that you might want to make available freely to the general public, because then that's going to fall into the wrong hands, and they're going to be people are going to go out and set your traps off on you. But that type of open, transparent dialogue, relationship building is going to solve a lot of these problems. So anyways, maybe some more to come on that. I'm trying to get another op-ed published. If I don't, I'll find another way to get it published that digs into a little bit more on risk management and policy building. When you start to compare the numbers of pets that are killed annually, but you put a denominator onto that number as a rate of per trap days, per traps on the landscape, it starts to become an infinitesimally small number from a risk management, a risk policy decision, even to the fact that most of the people going into the backcountry perceive the risk as being so minute, they don't have their dogs on a leash. So there's some reality to what the real risk in the real world is. And most of the population perceives the risk to be so low that an incident like what happened recently, north of me here, is a sad and an unfortunate thing, but in the grand scheme of things, it's incredibly rare and remote that it could happen. So, all right, Colorado fur ban.
Yeah, so
What's happening?
a rare American item on our list for today, because I think in a lot of ways it's a very unique problem that I think that our broader community should be aware of. Is there is a proposal going forward for consideration by Colorado, the commission, Parks and Wildlife Commission in Colorado, that'll be considered at the start of March, to ban the sale of wild fur. And we wild fur caught in the state of Colorado, and we often, more broadly in the fur industry, we try and rely on the idea that wild fur is the last bastion will be wild fur. Even if we lose everything else, we lose seals, we lose ranch fur, we'll still have wild fur. In the States, there's been a lot of efforts in recent years from anti-fur groups on banning sale of fur. I mean, they were successful in California, have largely been unsuccessful elsewhere. So we've seen in recent years this attempt to try and throw wedges into our community of, we're only going to ban farm fur. This is the first one that I'm aware of that's going to be trying to ban wild fur. And it follows on an attempt from last year with it's not a citizens initiative, and state ballot initiative, to try and ban sale of fur in the city of Denver and the county surrounding the city of Denver. And that was voted down 58-42, 58 against banning sale of fur in Denver. Now the antis, the Center for Biological Diversity, amongst others, are trying to push this to the commission and get the commission to make a decision that fur trapping is against the North American model of wildlife conservation. It's bad for wildlife in Colorado for some reason. And try and get the commission to rule, because then they don't need people to vote on it. They just need the commission to say, it doesn't make any sense to sell wild fur here in Colorado. So
because exactly the same bill was a proposition in the last federal election. There was the cat hunting proposition in Colorado.
The cat hunting, there was like 127, I think, and then there was the fur ban, which was 308,
and then the fur ban. Which the crazy thing was that was like Colorado's fur felt cowboy hat industry. It was fly tying materials. It was the gamut of things, and they got voted down. So that was the public ballot. Now they're trying to come at it from the commission level.
Yeah. So they're kind of jurisdiction shopping their issue now. So they're going to the commission. So I've been back and forth with Dan Gates down at Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management since I met him last fall on this. And looks like I'll actually be heading down to Denver in the first week of March to show support from the FIC and bring our perspective to this, and the perspective kind of the broader fur industry to this debate. And I mean, it's in a lot of ways in the States, I can only imagine how tiring it must be for the folks in the States of like, hey, there's a ballot initiative. Oh, hey, now it's going to the commission. Oh, hey, now there's a bill. Oh, hey, now there's a bill in the Senate. Oh, hey, now there's a bill. Like, there's so many different ways that the antis can try and get at these issues compared to what we have to deal with here in Canada. That really is like, okay, the government passed a bill or didn't pass a bill. It's really interesting to see the dynamic of like their agency, like CPW, the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Agency, and the attempt to try and get the commission to overrule basically the advice of the agency, which is that like, trapping is good and sales of fur is good. What are you trying to do here? Very different dynamic again than what we deal with here on this side of the border, where half the time our biggest issues are dealing with our departments and dealing with the folks that are the government side experts. So we'll be, it's not 100% set in stone. I think it's like 99% set in stone. I just need to find flights. But no, looking forward to head down to Denver and, really show the North American solidarity and show the antis that wherever they go, we would like them.
It's valuable for someone like you or me actually to get exposed to the mechanism of how these things are happening, because it makes us better advocates here in Canada, because we understand these mechanisms, these games, these power plays, these, and we can then look at our own system, right? And guard against it, prepare, those types of things. So valuable.
Yeah,
I feel bad for them down there, because they do get friggin' bombarded with these things. I mean, the next story I'll talk about Oregon, but it's like, I'm just sort of, sometimes I look down at the States and go, man, that commission model of the commissioners making the regulation decisions, and it's not politicians. It's like, that's cool. And then you see, oh, but they're stacking Washington's Wildlife Commission with all these hunting folks. Whoa, okay, that's not so good, right? So I'm like, I don't know what's.
Yeah, well, that just brings out the machinery of government nerd in me from once upon a time when I was in a political science degree, of like how, what is the best model? And I mean, there's no such thing as the best model of how government works, but is at the very least in our system, people are supposedly held accountable for the decisions that they make. Like, at the end of the day, the minister is the person signing off on it. Whether the minister has involved that responsibility 3 layers down, 4 layers down in the department, technically, at the end of the day, they are responsible for the decisions that they make. And I think,
and then they might not get reelected.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas in the American system,
where the commission model,
they put a whole bunch of different layers in between the person actually making decisions versus. And it's, you end up with agency staff or commissioners that are really just insulated from any responsibility for the decisions they make. And hard
And
to.
you see these things with the commission models where they're gonna in the United States, in Colorado, they're gonna, like, the commission is going to hear this proposed fur ban, and then they're gonna vote on it, and then it comes out it was, like it was a 5-3 vote, or
Yeah.
something, kind of like a Supreme Court decision, right? Like it comes down to this the majority vote type thing. So whether that's good or bad, I don't know. It's works in some states, and it's become a real cluster in other states.
I think that's the most generous way to describe this.
Yeah. You could put another word on the end of cluster. Washington and Oregon and Colorado, their models are turning into some clusters. Similar story in Oregon. So in Oregon right now, there's a initiative petition. So if it passes, I believe July, they have to have 117,000 names on a petition. There's the general rumors are they're sitting between 90 and 100,000 on this IP 28, Initiative 28. If it passes, it will go for legislative decision. Basically, what it's doing is it's removing the exemptions in a bunch of state laws that prohibit animal cruelty, that exempts laws that allow for hunting, that allow for ranchers to grow cows and kill them for food, and wildlife management, including trapping. Basically, every sector that laws allow you to kill an animal would basically go out of business. So ranching, hunting, trapping, fishing would all go by the wayside. So this is Initiative 28 in Oregon that's going on right now. So the likelihood that this thing will pass is probably very close to zero, but it is a massive, like you get 100,000 people that sign on to it. There's 100,000 people in the state of Oregon, which represent, they're a subsample of the, maybe the millions that like don't want beef. They don't want a beef industry. They don't want a chicken industry. They don't want, anything. Like I assume this might even affect like pet ownership, because the veterinarians wouldn't be allowed to euthanize a dying pet or an animal that's been smacked by a car on the highway and it's got a busted back. An officer wouldn't be able to put that animal down because you'd be killing it. So that would violate the law. So like, I don't know, but there's just a whole lot of perverted things could come out of, a law like this. Like I said, probably the chances of it passing are pretty remote, but they're using the system of this petition. And if it reaches the numbers by a certain date, it has to go in front of the commission, yada, 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 or the state legislators, wherever it ends up. So anyways, it's just something that's happening, creates awareness, creates education for us to understand that this is also a way that they're going after trapping in Oregon, is through this Initiative 2028.
Yeah, well, and this is I think everything old is new again. This is an approach that we're seeing the antis take more and more often. And this was something they tried a lot in like the 80s, and it didn't pan out. But we're seeing this right now. We didn't have this on the agenda to talk about, but there is a court challenge ongoing right now in Quebec from Animal Justice and the Montreal SPCA, where they are challenging the government's really the government's right to allow and regulate fur farming in the province of Quebec, and saying that the very existence of fur farming runs counter to the animal cruelty laws on the books in Quebec. So, this is something, obviously they go and do this in Quebec, a province where there is no fur farming, instead of going and doing this in Nova Scotia or in Ontario or in Manitoba, where there would be, I'd say more organized opposition to it. But, they're always trying to be where we're not, and they're always trying to take, a somewhat circuitous route to do what they're trying to accomplish. And, we see it in the States where they go and try and ban sale of fur in Hawaii. There's not a whole lot of fur, there are zero fur retailers in Hawaii. You don't want to be sitting on the beach in Maui in a full length mink. It's just some of these things that they try to go where we're not. And on this, it's not that they're trying to go where we're not geographically; it's that they're trying to go where we're not um, in terms of subject matter. Of like, we're going to go and get into animal cruelty laws, and it's like, okay, well now we got to go and do some reading on animal cruelty laws and ensure that we're in a position to be able to argue against this, instead of looking at where we're used to of regulations around trapping or regulations around hunting and things like that. They're trying to pull us out of where we're at, uh, because they know they can't beat us where we're at. They will try and beat us by some other measure and by trying to go around us. I mean, I grew up in the island of Cape Breton that was home to a great French naval fort called Louisbourg that had a wall on 3 sides because their thought was anyone that's trying to take the fort will come from the ocean. So they had a great big seawall facing the ocean, and the British just sailed past the fort, unloaded, and walked in the back of the fort because there was no real wall on the back of the fort. I'm not saying that we've only got walls on 3 sides, but it's that they will try and find the gap in what we're able to do and where we're at, where we're able to engage. So that's where we need to be as a movement. I mean, and not just trapping, not just fur, like it broadly as a sustainable use of wildlife movement and the animal agriculture movement of be ready to guard the gate for everybody, because it may be that they're going after, in some of these cases, they're going after animal ag, but they may be opening a door that allows them to go after hunting and trapping, or they may be going after hunting and trapping opens a door for them to go after animal ag. So,
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
broadest sense, we are kind of one community when it comes to dealing with the other side, that is opposed to us.
Yep, yep. Yeah, I mean, the broader community is the sustainable use of wildlife, or the sustainable use of
Of
animals,
animals, I
because
guess,
then
yeah.
that's the agriculture brought into it as well. So yeah, it's common belief systems, common lifestyles, common values, and common threats, across that whole community sector. So, well, it's good that hopefully people see value in kind of sharing what's going on in Colorado and Oregon. And I know we've talked in previous episodes on some of the other, like Vermont and whatnot. Tried a few little things. So yeah, we try to make sure that we're on the pulse of what's going on elsewhere in the world as well, just so that you're all rounded in the world of what's going on in our sector. We have a bunch of trapping association AGMs coming up this year that you wanted to mention.
Yeah, we're getting into AGM season a little bit here. So just for folks that are in Saskatchewan, STA is having their AGM March 13th and 14th in Humboldt. I wish I could be there. It's my daughter's birthday on the 13th, so not able to make the trip, unfortunately, this year. But I was there a couple years ago. I had a great time out in Humboldt. So if folks are listening from Saskatchewan, if you're a trapper or not a trapper and just want to go and meet some trappers, talk to some trappers, they're having their AGM there. And then here in Nova Scotia, TANS Trappers Association Nova Scotia is having their AGM March 6th to 8th in Millbrook. So Latrero in Millbrook. I will be there at least some of those days. So for folks here on the East Coast, if you want to come by, meet some great people, learn a bit about trapping, see some great fur handling demos. TANS always does a really great job on the fur handling demos. So.
And the BC Trappers Association AGM is in Quesnel, British Columbia, April 17th to the 19th, which both you and I are working on being there for that. So
yeah, still working on that. So hopefully we'll fit an episode in between now and then. But if not, now folks know they can come out to Quesnel and maybe see us.
yeah, absolutely. Great episode. Fills in a gap that we missed over the Christmas New Year break, but we're here, rocking and rolling. Lots of stories and exciting things for 2026. We're looking forward to keeping on top of all of these things and providing value to the industry in Canada. So if you got questions, comments, ideas, threads, topics, reach out to us, and we'd be happy to look at incorporating some new things into the show. So, any final parting thoughts?
Go buy fur. That's always my parting thought.
There you go. That's always your parting thought. Yep. I've been seeing lots on Facebook Marketplace, these various vintage pieces as well. And one of these days, this can see getting one and getting it remade at one of the facilities in Canada that takes them all apart, puts them all back together, new liners, takes a long coat, makes it short, makes it more modern or whatever, and then marking it up a little bit and reselling it. So very cool. All right, folks, thanks for listening. Enjoy covering these topics with Doug. He's the expert. He's the worldly guy on all these topics. So I learn a ton every episode, and I'm always excited to do one of these shows. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.